This is the Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula 1 steering wheel, and it's easily one of the most realistic sim racing steering wheels money can buy. And you're going to need a lot of money if you do want to buy one, but I'll touch more on that later. I have been waiting for this very moment since this wheel was revealed back in 2024, and quite simply I've not been disappointed. As a huge Formula 1 fan, being able to race with a replica of the wheel George and Lewis were using last year is a really special feeling. The wheel looks, and I imagine it feels just like its real world counterpart, and it's easily one of the most impressive wheels I've ever sim raced with. And you can pretty much end the review there. All joking aside though, I do want to take a deep dive look at this wheel, everything from design and performance to price and compatibility. My goal is really to see whether this wheel is worth its extreme price tag and if it's right for you. Starting at the top, this steering wheel was built by SimLab in partnership with the Mercedes-AMG Formula 1 team. SimLab had access to the wheel's real-world CAD model, which is one of the reasons why this replica is so close to the real thing. The manufacturing process is almost a mirror of how the real-world wheel is produced. You get a wheel made almost entirely out of carbon fibre, with a huge number of inputs at your disposal. Around the back are true-to-life Formula 1 style paddles, including the really unique hinged clutch for nailing those perfect standing starts. The real party piece though is the large 4.3-inch LCD display. This screen can show a huge range of live telemetry and is fully SimHub compatible, as well as being configurable within SimLab's own Race Director software. And that brings me to the price. Being a replica Formula 1 wheel, I expected it to be expensive. Whether I expected quite a high price tag as it demands, I'm not so sure. However, SimLab does have previous, with its grid engineering Porsche 911 RSR replica wheel fetching £1,900 or $1,999. This Mercedes-AMG Petronas Formula 1 wheel beats that price with an asking price of £2,265, $2,699 or €2,654. That by far makes this one of the most expensive sim racing wheels you can buy in 2025. Although if you want to be pernickety, this wheel was beaten out by the insane €9,500 Cosworth CCW Mark II Pro wheel. But other than that, you're going to be really hard pressed to find other steering wheels in this price range. Nothing really tops the £2,000 or dollar mark, and the best steering wheels from premium brands such as Cube Controls, GSI, Asher Racing only really stretch up to $1,500. Fanatec does have its Bentley wheel that costs £2,000 or dollars on the nose, which is the same price as the grid engineering Porsche 911 RSR wheel. That positions this Mercedes wheel in a class of its own, and that's because this style of Formula 1 replica hasn't ever really been done before. The closest we've got to an official F1 wheel in the past is the £350 Thrustmaster SF1000. Despite that wheel being a really decent budget option, these two F1 wheels couldn't be more different. So what do you get for your hard-earned $2,700? Well, the box itself is very smart with a spot UV design on the top. You also get a quick start guide, a sticker sheet so you can customize your inputs, and you also get a really nice quality braided 10-foot USB extension cable, along with a coiled Lumberg to USB cable and a bag full of tools to help you mount the wheel to any quick release adapter. And it's inside this bag that you really start to get your first look at the levels of detail SimLab want to achieve with this wheel. You get two different sticker sets, one which has Lewis's signature purple and the other with George Russell's blue, and both have slightly different function layouts to mirror the different drivers' preferences in real life. You also get an additional blue encoder which can be swapped in place of the pre-installed purple encoder if you do want to go full George Russell mode. Then we have the wheel itself, which is incredibly well protected by its foam cutout. SimLab's attention to detail when building this wheel is purely incredible. A lot of the real-world wheel has been incorporated into this replica and is all based on the real-world CAD model supplied by Mercedes-AMG. From there, each steering wheel is hand-built with a fully carbon fibre shell, just like the real one. The entire design, the number of inputs, and even the actual inputs themselves, such as the rotary encoders, are the same as the ones used on the real F1 wheel. The wheel itself has the exact dimensions of the original, measuring a perfect 280mm across. Every element is essentially a mirror image of the wheel it's replicating. The hand grips are an anti-static rubber silicone, which is never my first choice for a steering wheel. However, it once again mirrors the original, and they do feel incredibly ergonomic. They're deeper than they are wide, which gives them a really chunky and girthy feel. There are a huge number of inputs across the wheel with 9 rotary encoders, and for any technical heads out there, these are grey hill switches, which are exactly the same as the original wheel. You also get 12 front-facing push buttons and 2 additional buttons on the rear of the wheel, just above where your index finger rests. And we all remember those buttons after Lewis's brake magic incident at the Baku Grand Prix in 2021. Now, if you've ever watched a driver during a Formula 1 race, pushing inputs and making adjustments on their wheel, and thought to yourself, that looks easy, now is your chance to live up to that. With 23 different inputs across the face and the rear of the wheel, you can create the ultimate button layout for any sim racing game. It is worth noting that unlike many premium sim racing wheels, there aren't any button LEDs. And this is simply because the real world wheel doesn't have any button LEDs. This could be an issue for some sim racers who like to drive in a dark room, as it can sometimes make the inputs harder to find. However, you can customize each button cap with stickers from the multiple sticker sheets included, and I really recommend doing this, as the stickers can really elevate the look of the wheel, although this does sound kind of strange for a $2,500 wheel. But just to back up what I'm saying a little bit, here is a shot of the steering wheel before and after adding the stickers, and I think it looks a lot better after. When interacting with the inputs, everything feels really tight and on point. The push buttons have a really short throw with a really tactile click, and the rotary encoders are pretty stiff to rotate, not to the point where it's difficult to make adjustments, but stiff enough to ensure you don't accidentally turn an encoder or make an unintended change. One notable exclusion is the lack of a joystick or a funky switch. Almost every sim racing steering wheel has at least one of these, and it makes it easy to navigate through game menus directly from the wheel without needing a mouse or keyboard. But once again, this is a consequence of copying the real world wheel, which doesn't have any joysticks, so it's not really a problem that SimLab is accountable for. SimLab made the decision to keep the replica as real as possible, meaning these switches haven't been added, but it can be a small annoyance for those who are used to not taking their hands off the wheel to navigate menus or in-game HUD elements. Flipping the wheel over, things look surprisingly different from a regular sim racing steering wheel. For a start, there are just 3 paddles rather than the usual 4 or 6 that many wheels have, like the Acertec Invicta Formula wheel that I've got here. Across the top is a very thin rocker paddle, and a warning to those who strive for good ergonomics. This shifter isn't really the most ergonomically designed, but again, it's true to the real world wheel. You're almost forced to use your index finger to pull a shift, as it sits higher up on the rear of the wheel than most sim racing wheels. However, it does include various hardware adjustments that let you change the activation stiffness. You can also use it as a one-handed push-pull shifter if you need that emergency drink. Immediately below this is a single hinged clutch paddle. This again is identical to the real world wheel and is specifically designed for maximum control over your clutch release during any standing start procedure. It does feel rather unusual at first, as there's a lot of travel in the clutch, although this can be adjusted. There are also 2 physical cutouts for 2 of your fingers to fit into, and these may not be to everyone's preference, but realism is realism, I guess. After a little bit of trial and error, I actually kind of like this clutch style. Sandwiched between the clutch and the shifter is the Lumbergh connection port. This is how you connect the wheel to your PC. A coiled Lumbergh to USB adapter is included in the box, and you can also decide to remove this connector completely and opt for a pass-through connection directly through the mounting hub. The inclusion of a direct PC connection means that as long as you can physically mount the wheel to a wheelbase, it can be used with any third-party brand. Talking of mounting, the wheel comes pre-installed with a hub with a 70mm PCD and threaded M5 holes. This makes it really incredibly easy to mount to any quick release adapter using just 3 screws, letting you use this wheel with almost any wheelbase. I have my wheel mounted to a Fanatec podium hub, but you can opt for a Simucube or Acertec wheelbase, or any other wheel that features a quick release adapter. Now, I mentioned earlier that this wheel is compatible with both SimHub and Race Director. Between these 2 pieces of software, you can really customize how the display looks and functions. With SimHub, you can create or download a huge number of custom dash layouts. Although if you're looking for ultimate immersion, I'm not sure you're going to need any community-made designs. SimLab have replicated the real-world Mercedes-AMG F1 display with all of the same functionality and design, as well as including a variety of other dash designs to choose from. I've been using this default F1 dash almost exclusively, as I think SimLab have done an excellent job. You can see all the key information, including your tyre and brake temperature, your ERS battery level, fuel level, and deployment mode. You also get the usual batch of lap time data, including your live delta, last lap time, and lap count. All of that information is great, but SimLab have also designed the display to function similarly to the real-world wheel. And this means every time you cross the start-finish line, you're going to see a summary of key information. The screen also changes with a safety car and shows the changes to your car setup, such as your brake bias or any traction control adjustments that you make. Now, when you're spending over £2,000 or dollars on any piece of hardware, you're going to want the quality in the product itself to be pretty flawless. I've run my eye over this SimLab steering wheel and, well, I couldn't spot too many issues with the quality at all. After looking really hard, the only two minor issues I could see were a slight scuff on the rear of the carbon fibre and the smallest amount of glue seepage where the rubber hand grips have been installed. And that is really it. With every wheel being hand built, this may differ from wheel to wheel, but this example fills me with the confidence that SimLab has incredibly high QC requirements. As you'd expect with this type of wheel, there are plenty of adjustments you can make. You can make adjustments to the clutch paddle to allow you to tune it to your own preference. You can adjust the travel of the clutch itself by simply turning the internal screw in either direction, and this can help you feel a little bit more comfortable with standing starts. You can also adjust the push-pull shifter paddle. This shifter can be removed entirely, allowing you to access the magnets and rubber pads inside. Swapping the layout of these magnets with the two additional magnets that are included in the box can result in less shifter force required. In total, there are 4 different combinations which result in a range from 0.2 kg up to 0.9 kg of force required to activate the shifter. I'm never really a fan of having to disassemble a steering wheel to gain access to adjustments. However, the clutch and shifter paddle adjustments really are easy enough to make with a single Allen key. Moving over to this wheel's software, you get SimHub compatibility as I mentioned earlier, and that's good if you like a centralized point to manage different aspects of your sim racing setup. SimLab also has its own software called Race Director, and this is where you can really dive into the functionality of the wheel and make some key adjustments. After updating the firmware, your first choice is between simple and expert modes. The difference here is that the simple mode removes the option to adjust your clutch bite point, and it sets all encoders to work as simple rotary encoder switches. Expert mode lets you change any of the encoders between being an encoder and a multi-position switch. The display tab lets us choose which dash we want to show with options for the W15 replica dash or a variety of other real-world options. You can also cycle through these using shortcuts on the wheel itself. If you click into the dash preferences, you can change the behaviour of the dash. You can adjust the levels for when you get fuel warning lights, set fuel consumption targets, and change some other settings. Crucially, this is where you can change between kph and mph. You get an equal amount of adjustability over the LED lights. You can choose different profiles which affect which LEDs light up and when, and you can also change the brightness and the blink speed. Now, let's put this wheel through its paces on the rig to see if it performs as well as I'd hoped. To start with, this is a 280mm wheel, which is really the sweet spot for a Formula style sim racing wheel. It's small enough to feel nimble, but large enough to not feel too small and toy-like. Being a true F1 wheel, it's ideal for any form of open wheel racing. If you plan on using this wheel for GT racing, the lack of a closed bottom to the hand grips can make it slightly more awkward to rotate the wheel past 180 degrees in either direction, but that's not really its intended use. During gameplay, every input is easily within reach. Formula 1 engineers have carefully considered the position of every input over years and years of development, so this is no real surprise. Each button is firm to push and has an incredibly tactile feeling, and the encoders feel stiff, which can be a little bit uncomfortable to use if you're racing without gloves on. The shifters themselves take a little bit of getting used to due to that narrow design and the high placement. After a few race sessions, I felt comfortable enough with them, and the activation feel is really solid. There is a reasonably loud sound with every shift, but it's nothing compared to some wheels that I've tried in the past. The wheel itself really holds up as you'd expect. The carbon fibre construction makes this wheel incredibly light, making it feel nimble and responsive to use. At higher force feedback torque levels, the wheel remains completely rigid with zero noticeable flex in any part of the wheel. But truthfully, at this price point, a lot of this is to be expected. And this brings me on to my final question, which has two parts. First of all, would you spend over £2,000 or dollars on any sim racing steering wheel? If the answer is yes to that, then the second part of the question is, should you buy this SimLab wheel? Now, the tiny quality control issues I mentioned earlier may be a factor for some sim racers, and additionally, the lack of button LEDs on a £2,000 or dollar steering wheel, or the rubber silicone hand grips instead of a more luxurious material such as leather or Alcantara, could all be buying factors. However, this wheel is uncompromisingly realistic, for better or for worse. If you're a Formula 1 fan, a Mercedes-AMG fan, or a George Russell fan, there is no doubt that this is the ultimate sim racing steering wheel for you. I've really had to pinch myself a couple of times during my time with this wheel, when I've looked down and realised I'm using an officially licensed Mercedes-AMG F1 wheel. This certainly isn't the best sim racing steering wheel for all occasions. The price alone will put many off, however the authenticity of this wheel really draws me in. There are no other steering wheels on the market that compete directly with this SimLab wheel. On the rig, it performs as well as any other. The carbon fibre shell makes it light and extremely rigid, and all inputs feel premium to interact with. Also, the layout is superbly ergonomic and really well considered. But a lot of this is thanks to years of Formula 1 development to design the perfect F1 steering wheel. This Mercedes-AMG F1 steering wheel succeeds as a one-of-a-kind piece of art that is superb to sim race with and gorgeous to look at and display on a shelf.